So here we go, it's time for the British Open Championship for Minimax. Dan Zelos and Connor Hall on the front row of the grid, with Tom Gamble and Sandy Mitchell on row 2. Dean McDonald and Josh Skelton are there on row 3. No Zach Falk in 7th place because he's not taking the start due to a technical problem. Luke Wooder is there in 8th place ahead of Jordan Brown-Nutley and Josh Smith. Off the start, there could be quite a few fast movers, and that's Wooder! Wooder's gone off already! Spat out on the start line. It looks like there was slight contact between him and Josh Smith, and we got another spinner in the mid-pack. He rejoins at the back of the field, but Josh Smith coming together there with Luke Wooder. Now, I don't really think that was his fault, Alan, because it was just a case of too many carts getting too close together. I think he might even have been loaded behind himself.
Yeah, there's a big debates going on in karting at the moment about loading. As we see another kart running wide, that's Connor Hall. That's Connor Hall, one of the championship favourites. He's run wide, another kart run was wide as well. Lots of debate at the moment in karting about the speed of starts and should they be faster. If it's a faster start, you tend not to get the loading. When it's quite slow at the start, as we see the 9 kart leading with McDonald in 2nd place. It's Dan Zelos that leads it from McDonald in 2nd. The debate at the moment, as we see Connor Hall trying to make his way through the field, the 5 kart, is how fast should the starts be, Jake? If the faster the starts, you tend not to get so much loading. And loading is where carts behind, one cart pushes the cart in front, pushes that cart into the cart in front, pushes those 3 carts into the cart in front, and eventually there's a cart right at the front of 5 or 6 carts, or maybe 9 or 10 carts, and that cart just literally gets shoved either off the circuit or shoved wide through turn 1. As we saw there with Luke Wooder, he was shoved off into the barriers. We could see it was 58 right behind him. I think that was Josh Smith, but was Josh Smith himself being loaded? We just can't tell from those pictures.
I think it's fair to say he probably was. It's just one of those chain reactions. There was not really much that Wooder could have done about it, and it didn't look much like there was anything Josh Smith could have done about it either. So Dan Zelos leading, 52 McDonald is there in 2nd, 3rd is Tom Gamble in the 23. The rest of the field filing through. That was the 19 that spun on that first lap as well then. So the 19 of Sandy Mitchell spinning down the back of the grid. Now he was on 4th on the grid, so 2 big movers then in the early stages. We've got a black and white flag out for somebody, so dangerous driving, moderate your driving is the message there. I think that might actually have gone to the number 5 of Connor Hall. It certainly moved a little bit closer to the drivers when Hall was coming past. Either that or it's the chap behind him in the number 8 of Jack McCarthy, who's trying to make his way past. But again, from this angle, you just can't tell who's getting the black and white.
No, it's difficult. We can't actually see the numbers from this angle at the moment. We don't have that information. We can only surmise it. It certainly looks like one of these drivers that were getting a warning flag. We're not sure what for. Didn't particularly see any contact, but in the meanwhile, anyway, it's Dan Zelos out front on the 9 kart. McDonald's chasing him, then Gamble. Gamble started in 3rd place, I think, and is still there in 3rd, and just in behind Gamble's at 43, Josh Skelton.
I think it was, yes, and you could see the way that Zelos was cooking the kart through the corners, the back end sliding out. He's taking it more like a rallycross car than he is a kart at the moment. He's loving these conditions and pulling out a nice advantage. He's driving this with style, even though he's using a bit too much perhaps of the curb here, there and everywhere, but he's certainly got enough of an advantage, enough grip, enough style, and certainly enough attitude to take this one going away. Great battling behind still as McDonald and Gamble are desperately trying to close in. And isn't it interesting that the drivers in 1st, 3rd and 5th on the grid are the drivers in the top 3 at the moment. Connor Hall and Sandy Mitchell, who were starting, of course, on the right-hand side of the grid, are the ones that got spat out at the chicane.
Starting on the left-hand side of the grid, in fact, they were on the outside, and that's always a bit of a nightmare going into the chicane here. There has been a debate and argument in the past to take that chicane out of play, just go through the chicane. We'll have a look at it in just a minute. The tarmac does go straight on through the chicane. One of the arguments was, well, take the chicane out at the start, just go straight down to the hairpin. But of course, all that means, Jake, is that the carts, as you see here, this is a chicane. You see the tarmac that goes straight through the chicane there. The argument was on the first lap, just take that chicane out of play, which they do in gearbox races, I think, if I remember rightly, and just send them straight down to the chicane. But of course, straight down to the hairpin, I beg your pardon, at the bottom of the circuit here at McRae's. But of course, the problem is the carts arrive at the hairpin at speed and everybody's braking, and of course the same thing happens then. If it's a slow start, you can get loading into that hairpin and you get similar sorts of problems. So either way, it's just, it's one of the vagaries of this circuit when you're on the outside going into that chicane, it can be difficult, and you can end up getting contact and ending up down the field, and that certainly happened with Connor and Sandy Mitchell as well.
So I suppose it ends up being a case of better the devil you know, choosing the chicane for all of the carnage rather than the hairpin, but it's difficult. Yeah, exactly. I mean, where do you propose to get all those karts into a straight line? It's difficult to tell. Out in front then, Zelos from McDonald and Gamble, still pushing on out at the front of the field. We've got a nice little battle developing here for about 5th position, I think this is. We've got the 53 at the head of the field. That's Brown Nutley. Then the 12 comes through. That, of course, is Harrison Thomas. And couldn't quite see who was in the tail end of that trio. We'll have a look as he comes through now. It's the 5. So Connor Hall making his way steadily through the pack. And he's already honed down on Brown Nutley and Thomas as they chase after their own top 6 positions behind the 43 of Josh Skelton. Up the inside, Hall makes his move on Thomas. There was a bit of contact as well, so not the cleanest passing move he'll ever make, but it's certainly enough to move him up a position. And now he's going to have to make quite a decisive move on Brown Nutley as well if he wants to make 5th position out of this. And he's certainly having to dice with death through the corners, if you like, in terms of his race credentials. He wants the O plate, and he's going to have a very tall order of moving up through the field. But we did see earlier how Johnny Edgar went from the back to the front, and I have a feeling that Connor Hall will want to do it himself.
Yeah, and again, as I said earlier, it can depend here, as we see Hall up the inside for another spot. So Connor Hall certainly on the move. Looks like the fastest man on the track. It does depend on what tyres you've put in part firm in, how much use you've had on those tyres early on in the weekend during the heats leading up to this final. If in these conditions you can see the rooster tails coming off the back, you're looking for a decent amount of tread on the tyres. You don't want what we like to call in karting intermediate tyres. Basically that means, Jake, that they're wet tyres that are slightly knackered, frankly. They're not intermediates at all. We don't have any such thing. It's just whether or not you've got a bit of tread off the tyres, which if it's a drying track, that's what you want. But in these conditions, you want tyres with a decent amount of tread on. And of course, if you've looked after your tyres earlier on in the weekend, or you've maybe been on slicks in a heat when it started raining, other people's have been on wets and it's dried and they've used up their wets and you haven't, you've still got reasonable tread on your tyres, you can, as we saw Johnny earlier, go from the back to the front. I'm not sure what the situation was with Johnny's tyres, but certainly in this race there will be some drivers that have got treads that have been slightly chewed up early on in the weekend, and you will have others, maybe Connor Hall here, so we can see making his way through the field, who've got a decent set of tyres and able to take advantage of other karts in these conditions. So we come out of the Stuart S's, he's right on the back of the 43, that's Josh Skelton, looking down the inside here into the right-hander and makes that stick at St John's. The left-hander here, Sonny Bend, and out through paddock, through the right-hander here at paddock, and then across the start-finish line one more time. Connor Hall definitely on the move.
I make that 3 positions in as many laps. It looks like the black and white's coming out again for somebody else, but Connor Hall, there you are, lightning speed at the moment, 57.90 for the fastest lap in these conditions. I can tell you that is an impressive lap he's done there, and you can always tell somebody trying to storm their way through the field. They've got that red mist, they're pushing very hard indeed. They'll usually be the one, once they've got some clean air, that will set the fastest lap of the race, but some interesting moves throughout. When you consider that the leaders are currently on 58.2s, 58.3s, a 57.9 is very impressive indeed, and that's actually moved him into 4th position. The man he's now catching is the 23 of Tom Gamble, who is there in 3rd position. The leaders are still pulling away. In fact, it looks like Zelos has actually been hauled in here a little by Dean McDonald, who is not going to let Zelos run away with it. He's actually closed the gap in right down here into the last lap of the British Open Championship here at Rowrah. This is a do-or-die race weekend. It's a one-off championship weekend. It's for a lot of drivers, it's a win-or-nothing scenario. So if you think this race is done, I think Dean McDonald might have something else to say about it. If he gets a whiff of this race victory, he will try it. Into the last corner, Zelos is there in the number 9. Oh, McDonald's going for it. Oh dear. You couldn't get much closer. Zelos takes it. McDonald, a valiant effort, just not close enough, but what a brilliant effort.
Dan Zelos, British Open champion. You'll be running the O plate for the rest of the season. That must make you very happy. Comfortable win for you?
Not really. Had Dean McDonald catch me every lap, little bit by little bit. Put me under pressure on the last 2 laps. He was definitely quicker than me, but I had enough gap for the start of the race just to hold it. And yeah, really happy with it.
And wet conditions today, pretty tricky. You obviously like the wet. Look like you're going really well out there.
Yeah, this is my favourite track, Raura. We were slightly off the pace in the dry, became wet and was straight away on it. Won the pre-final, then won the final. Yeah, I'm really happy with how I performed today.
Okay, well, congratulations. Anyone you want to thank?
Yeah, Tooney Motorsport and my mum and dad for helping me and pushing me all the way through this weekend. Without them, I'd be nowhere near here today.
So the British Open champions are crowned. Join us in 3 weeks on Motors TV when the first round of the Super 1 MSA British Karting Championships get underway, right here at Raura.